Ready? I am as ready as I can be.
Wee.
Where are we with our notes? It's just so much information.
So much information. Hello, friends, and welcome to Grounded in Motion. We are super stoked to be here with you today for another episode. And today we're going to lean into the pelvic floor.
Yes.
We're going to address a multitude of areas that we want to discuss, things to look out for, ways to support your pelvic health. So yes, that is what we're up to today.
And then let me just bring this up. This is the second recording we do of the pelvic floor because the last one I was wearing beads and the beads ruined it. So the audio was ruined in the last video. So we're back. I'm gonna be careful with my audio today too. So we're back better than the last time. Like Malia said, with some pretty good information. So I think we're covering two aspects of it.
I was just gonna go with that, yes.
So we're gonna cover two aspects of it. Malia is gonna cover a lot more of the emotional aspect, which honestly, I honor her a lot for doing that. I've learned, since starting the podcast, a lot more from her when it comes to exercise, movement, and your emotional awareness. So she's gonna be covering that. And I'm gonna cover the more mechanical stuff, the exercises, how we do them, and how your muscles support your pelvic floor function. And then she's also gonna always do some anatomy breakdown. So
Okay.
Yeah.
I brought the pelvis. Ooh, the pelvis is falling apart. Okay. We have I'm gonna close this for a minute. The pelvis, and you have two main muscles of your pelvic floor, although there are three aspects of those two muscles, so it really ends up being five, but we won't get into all those details. But you have your two sit bones that you sit on. Then you have your pubic symphysis, the front of your pubic bone, and you have your tailbone. And it's kind of like this diamond. And then you have like your perineum and the mechanical outer part of the pelvic floor. Oops.
It is falling apart.
And there it goes. It's falling apart. No. But we're here to fix it.
So as you see, it is muscles in there, you know.
And then the part that let's talk about the SI joint, because a lot of people talk about the SI joint, but I don't know if we really understand what the SI joint is. So your sacrum, which comes down from the low back into the pelvis, is a part of your spine, but it connects to the ilium of the pelvis, and that creates your joint. So the sacrum, your spine, connects to your pelvis. Where they merge and creates your pelvic complex is called the SI joint.
So what are some common myths you hear about the SI joint and SI joint and pelvic floor, kind of merging together? Because I know she's bringing this up because she's like, listen.
So you can't put your sacrum or your SI joint out of place. It doesn't move. It does, but it doesn't move like we think, oh, my SI joint's out. And then you go to the chiropractor and they adjust it and put it back in place. That's not quite how that works. So that's one. And pelvic floor,
we'll just get into it as
it'll come up as we go. Right. But I wanted to get that with you. And another part, one of the things with the pelvic health is the core four. And one of the muscles of the core four is your pelvic floor. And then the transverse abdominis, which is your deep core or your lower abs. I want you to think that those muscles wrap from your spine in the back around the ridge of the pelvis, and then they connect here. So one of my favorite cues or ways to think about engaging those muscles and connect with them, there's a few of my favorite ways. Number one is think of magnetizing your two hip points together on an exhale. Another one is if you think of the pubic symphysis and those two hip points, You want it like a drawstring pull, right? To get this lower to pull together. And one that works really well, if you get out of your head about making a sound, is if you make a snake sound. When you stop focusing so much on the sound and feel it in your body, it engages the transverse, and that can be a really great way to connect with these muscles, because a lot of us do not have that connection to the transverse to be like, how do I squeeze and how do I feel that and what is that? And so laying on your back is a great way to do it, and just making the snake sound, and you'll begin to feel and connect to that transverse. Your pelvic floor, a great way, is part of the core four, and then also just to round out the core four, your diaphragm and the multifidus of the spine, which are very little baby muscles along
right there,
your spine.
So it's a lot of deep musculature in there. That's why she brought up breathing first, because it's a process and it's a system, and the breathing is very involved in that deep internal pressure that's created in the pelvic floor and through the diaphragm and all that goodness. So, but then let's talk about some symptoms, things that people feel because Malia breaking down the anatomy. I'm gonna put the anatomy visuals up there, but what do you feel? Like, how do you know, how do you end up with pelvic floor dysfunction, and what symptoms can you suffer from before even getting to that point? Like, what dysfunctions occur? So, I mean, before, in my opinion, with a lot of the people I've worked with, having worked in a therapeutic setting, not at the gym, only because Malia also has this experience, before the pelvic floor even starts to really become weak, people can complain of knee pain, hip pain, constant low back pain, inner thigh pain. Also, groin pain is another big sign. There's a lot of things pulling in incorrect and proper directions, and there's mechanical dysfunction occurring if you're having the pubic bone pain and discomfort and inner thigh discomfort already. That's a big sign.
And then if you go to pelvic floor, pelvic health specific, incontinence, whether it's fecal or urinary, stress incontinence, you have pelvic organ prolapse. Those are signs that the pelvic floor is often too tight. It is becomes so tight, which is why, most people do Kegels wrong, but when someone tells you to do Kegels or you try and nothing changes, is because you're trying to contract a muscle that's already overly contracted, and that just doesn't work. And a lot of the work is getting the pelvic floor to stretch and relax, coordinate your breathing, and then begin to find...
Which is internally going to, create a balanced pressure flow. So I would say maybe breathing would be the first step to that relaxation. It's not going to be trying to stretch in a pigeon pose and in butterfly pose. No. It's not going to be that. No. So let's clarify that. This is internal pressure system that's occurring. That's going to release that tightness and all that, once again, starting with the breath. So
100%. And we will provide a couple wonderful exercises or ways to connect to the pelvic floor, because a lot of people are also like, I can't feel my pelvic floor, because the brain pathways, the nervous system pathways have been turned off from that connection. Also, painful sex can be, sometimes an issue of that. And so
you're gonna have sexual dysfunction too. So if you're having any pain or discomfort, that will lead into that. But then also, Malia, I want her to go over it a little bit.
I'm gonna go right into it.
The emotional, we're gonna get a little bit into the whole, I want to say spiritual, psycho-spiritual aspect of it, because a lot of people are bringing this up now, the emotions and, the somatic stuff, but it takes a whole body approach. And that's why we covered the anatomy portion first and addressed that. Breathing, because still, we want to look at the whole thing. And Malia will cover that because...
And we do want to acknowledge that this is a very sensitive area for a lot of people. For a multitude of reasons. And a huge part of that, if you go into a little bit more spiritual, is your chakra system. And your root chakra is right here at the base of your spine in that pelvic floor area. And that has everything to do with safety, security, your home life, your ancestors, your family, your family lineage, where they come, their generational trauma. Do you have enough food to survive, right? Those survival skills. It's a very heavy and dense energy center. And so then you have your second chakra, which is just a few inches above, still in that pelvic region, and that's going to address pleasure and pain and your sexual energetics, money. It's all about flow and movement, and a lot of times, like we just mentioned, this pelvic floor gets really tight and contracted. So the movement energetically and physically on a muscle, skeletal, and energetic get rigid. And that's why a lot of people have back pain. So we just want to acknowledge that it's a very sensitive area, and we want to not underestimate or underappreciate all of the work that goes into this very specific area for trauma, for sexual trauma, for the energetics of safety and feeling grounded and connected to community. And so we want to acknowledge that. And we can, with all different types of movements and modalities and work, get this moving again, get this area freed up. And a lot of the times that also supports getting rid of your back pain or your knee pain.
Absolutely.
And so it's a whole process. It's a big area.
Holistic approach.
Yeah, it's a heavy area. And so we wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that. And if you feel comfortable and safe, we're going to move into, more mechanical and how to work with it. But breathing is a huge part of that. Organizing the core four so that they work together, because your respiratory diaphragm and then your pelvic diaphragm move together when you breathe. So when you take an inhale, they both widen and expand, and then they both dome back up on an exhale.
Right.
So
the breathing is
your pelvis gently moves and comes back in, kind of like a trampoline, right? Like it goes down and out, and it rebounds back and up.
Now that we're with the breath, and then we're about to transition into the more mechanical aspect of it. Now
you want to try it.
Mechanically, yes, you want to master some form of breath awareness, breath work, and you want to integrate that into your movements, into your exercises, whatever it is you may be doing.
Is what I would say. You need to understand and know how to work not necessarily the core four, but the diaphragm and the transverse, to be able to move into the mechanical to get the best possible.
For many layers, you're going to be decompressing, you're going to be involving the pelvic floor already, because you're creating that pressure. You're going to be enhancing your focus and concentration too, because we know that the breathing does that. You're going to be relaxing the nervous system, so you're going to be getting a lot of it done, and it must be integrated into your physical movement, your physical therapeutic exercises, whatever modalities you're choosing to work with in terms of strengthening, toning, stabilizing, and improving your lower body mechanics, okay? So in terms of mechanics, because a lot of people do exercises, and I see a lot of women sometimes kind of volunteering to do some strange exercises. And I'm going to bring it up first because I want to debunk first before I explain why the debunking is important. So internal props and objects that they use, you understand? They do this a lot in different types of therapies where it'll be intravaginal exercises. Now, I'm not for that and I'm not against that. I prefer an organic way, natural of doing that, which I'll hit at the end more. So stay tuned. It has to do with sex, So in terms of really strengthening, I don't think those things work, in my honest opinion. Maybe a little bit can bring you into awareness, but still, mechanically, there's so much. Are you connecting to your hip movements? Are you moving your hips in an efficient way? So you can strengthen on the daily as you're picking up your child, as you're moving your groceries, moving things and objects around your house, and moving how nature intended us women and both men to move too, in that hinge squat mechanic. you know? So you want to look at that. That's an intuitive, primitive movement. The squat, I feel like one of these like corny, but it's true. You know, you can do squat, corny trainers are like, squat is the answer, but it's not the answer, but you want to have that. You want to regain that movement. And then how do we regain that? You know, you want to do exercises that help to strengthen and stabilize your lower body. The options will be yours, your approach. There's many ways to do that, but I'm gonna break down a little bit of anatomy and mechanical stuff just because, you know, just for the sake of it. This is how Malia and I were trained, or we were taught, like the fundamentals, anatomy, the movement, the logic behind it, and then you can make better choices as to what works for you also well, you know. Malia believes in exercising and exercises being used certain times, certain points in your life, depending on your emotions too. So, you know, this is why this is important. So mechanically speaking, you want to, today we're not talking about internal techniques or Kegels as a standalone solution. We're talking about mechanical whole body approach, one that looks at the structure and the function of your lower body, hips and core as an integrated system. The pelvic floor is not isolated, okay? It relies on proper alignment, core strength, the TVA and diaphragm, and functional hip and leg muscle support, okay? Alignment, a lot of people go against the alignment, but it's important. You can't build strength on top of misalignment, period.
You can, but you're just going to
compensate.
Well, you're going to compensate and you're just going to strengthen your pain points.
There we go. Period.
That's all I gotta say.
Period. You think of your lower body as a kinetic chain. The pelvis needs neutral position, not overly tilted or tucked. The rib cage stacked over the pelvis, not flaring forward. The femur leg bones aligned under the hips, not rotated or collapsed inward. And the feet anchored, active and supporting proper tracking, okay? So that's just basic structural building foundation, you know? And once again, the pelvic floor will be supported as you have the appropriate muscles to support that. You need a surrounding system that, you know, strong hips, strong inner thighs, strong quads, legs, glutes, creates like a little canopy for your pelvic floor. So, you know, you really can't do it without muscles, you know? You wanna have that strong movement.
Flexible movement.
Flexible, of course. Mobility is also included in here, not only strength, or just, you know, having movement, because this will go for both men and women, where they cannot move their hips to save themselves, where they will break something before their hips can actually move. This is not good for your pelvic, for the pelvic health, period, for the pelvic floor. This is a sign. You want to avoid that. Can't do this, my hip, big red flag. So back to breathing and core mechanics. We already know, we went through that. The breathing affects how the pelvic floor loads and unloads. Exhales engage the deep core. Inhales allow the pelvic floor to descend and relax. So that's why you're doing this breathing and you're practicing your breathing techniques and putting the work in. You gotta do practice. You gotta work. You gotta have discipline to do these things, you know. So we have the hip complex. You can talk about strength, stability, and mobility. It's important. You want to have strong legs. You want to be able to move in life, you know? So you can't strengthen what you can't control, and you can't control what isn't aligned. Stability training, mobility work, strength training. For stability training, think of unilateral movement, single leg workouts. We're getting into a little bit more tips and shit because we covered some good chunk already. Balance drills. Whatever. You like yoga? Do balance yoga poses. You like strength training? Do that too. You're doing functional? Practice that. If you're having these dysfunctions and you know or you have been told that you have pelvic floor dysfunction, unilateral movement, single leg workout, balance drills is good for you. Mobility work, internal and external hip rotation and hip extension. The pelvic floor will get tight if you cannot move internal, external hip extension. Where are you going? What are you going to release? You can't move your femur. There's no movement in there. It's stuck, it's stagnant. So these ranges of motion are going to be very important for you to maintain, for you to check in with yourself, do the mobility work you need, be aware of your body. Maybe you need more internal, maybe you need more external, more hip extension, you know, explore. And then of course the strength training. Glutes, hamstrings, adductors, core, all vital. And then that helps to support the pelvic floor. You can do your squats, we have a great video that we just released now with the hinges and the lunges and the rotations and all of this stuff that we're talking about here. We don't have to do crazy weird exercises, huh? And we don't have to intravaginally insert anything. We can use these simple techniques and understandings to address, your hip function. And at the end of the day, it's gonna give you longevity. And when you are, we do reach that age, we will have a pelvic floor that's healthy, but we gotta start now at some point, right? Not when there's like an emergency, or we wanna be able to practice these things so we can age nicely and gracefully too, and not, we already get where my head is going at is sad, so. For real, sometimes we gotta talk about things like this, and it's, okay?
Yes, I work with too many women who can't jump or run because they pee their pants. They can't sneeze, they can't laugh too hard, like unexpected laughter because it's a change in pressure will cause them to wet themselves. And that goes into the emotional state of anxiety and stress because you want to laugh, but it's, are you going to be able to with your friends? And so it becomes, I gotta go pee before I leave, or I gotta do this, and then I'm with my friends, and that can become a huge
but you're
emotional
not alone. There's a lot of women, you're not alone. There's a lot of women, there's always a solution, and there's always, an approach to addressing that. Those are the flags. If you are feeling that, step up for yourself, do your research, and then you're gonna have some answers and solutions. You gotta take steps. You gotta be strong and willing to change, Okay, so now, one of my favorite muscle groups. We brought it up so many times already. This is the second recording, okay? So, but it's leading more towards the end, and we're towards the end of the mechanical aspect already, and it's leading towards that pressure. It's that pressure point, and then we're gonna throw in, we'll talk a little bit, both of us together, about the inner thigh tension and the breathing and why we like it so much. Integrated, sorry, together. So why the inner thighs matter, the adductors. Your inner thighs don't just look nice. They stabilize the legs and bones, okay, for your hips, So yes, you're gonna strengthen your inner thighs, which is a plus, so you can get them strong with taking some of these techniques. And remember, we're getting close to the deep pelvic floor muscles and all of that goodness. So why do we miss the adductors? Like as trainers even, how can we overlook it? Or even as therapists, it's so interconnected and it's so center line to that pelvic floor pressure that it's just definitely cannot overlook it. So if you've been skipping out on some adductor stuff or activating your inner thighs, pay attention, now is the time. So your adductors help control your pelvic tilt and leg alignment. Crucial in stabilizing during walking, lunging, and squatting, so it's important regardless for your routines and your training. Props like a ball or yoga block can enhance activation. And ignoring them, a major missing link in hip stability and pelvic floor dysfunction. It's like totally overlooked. Probably one of my favorites. Absolutely incredible muscle group. It's a power muscle, stabilizer, prime mover, and a stabilizer. So, okay, weak adductors are linked to altered pelvic mechanics and increased risk of groin and pelvic dysfunction. So it's just not overlooked. So you want to talk about a little bit more inner thigh. Okay, let's throw this out there. You can lay down on the floor. I'm gonna put a clip because we have many of these. Once again, we've recorded some good stuff. All the tips are in our recordings, in the movement series, where we're just literally laying down and we're squeezing into the block, and you guys are like, what the hell are these girls doing? Who does that? Like, why is Malia, in the latest video, why does Malia have her block in between the thigh and the knees over as she's doing her core? It's because of this. We're multitasker when it comes to movement.
I only got so much time. We gotta
get our inner thighs, our pelvic floor, and our core working at the same time. So it's the appropriate way to do it because you're using a whole chain of muscles and a center line chain. So good for you. So I'm definitely gonna put up there, and I'm gonna link in this video whatever I see that we've done so far that is related to this too. So inner thighs, work them, use them. Think of them as you're exercising. If your squats don't look good.
Think about them in bridges.
Yes,
when you're doing some certain hamstring stuff is really great to squeeze a block. The core work that I was doing, really next level integration and strength.
Right.
Organization.
Yes, step it up with this adductor work. I think we are probably like the only ones talking about this. Like, I can't find anybody else talking much about this adductor.
Let it be us.
This is why we're getting in our recording. No, I'm just kidding. But no, this is why we're bringing it out to you guys so you guys can know. Like sometimes there's missing links, you know. And then I have here why Kegels and intravaginal devices aren't enough. Kegels isolated contractions are limited, and they don't mimic any real movements.
They are often done wrong.
Yeah, and they don't build full body tension.
Right, and it's not just like a lot of people say when you do a Kegel, it's like squeezing off the P or holding your P. That's actually not what we're going for. Think of it more like an elevator. There's 3 areas through the pelvis that we're trying to engage. So when I work with a lot of clients, it's more about floor 1, 2, and 3, and then with the breathing, going back down 3, 2, 1. It's not just squeeze and release, squeeze and release. It's not the bandhas like Mula Bandha in yoga, whereas you're locking and squeezing and holding that in. That's not what we're going for, and that cue is so misused in, I won't even get into it. It's so misused in yoga and exacerbating so many women's health issues.
It's not what we're talking about. We did not say that. So it's not. Listen, pulling on one string is not gonna be enough.
Right.
It's one little string. Okay.
So don't try to just do Kegels.
Yes. So also to end topics, dance is good. I think it's really good.
It's that flow.
You gotta move, you gotta dance, you gotta flow. Movement, free movement is kinesthetic intelligence. It's movement intelligence, movement awareness. That builds emotional intelligence, and that is a good way to release stored emotions. So understand that you want to move your body to also release, and dance is a very beautiful way to do so. And it feels awkward for some, but that's where the work is, you know? Is in freeing and liberating yourself and moving the body, and it is great for your hips, it is great for your lower body, and there's different types of dance that are more lower body focused. I'll put some up there so you guys can see, but there's different types. I say bachata moves one a lot. Whoa.
Oh yeah.
Wow. I don't know if I can keep up. No, that's intense moving. Hula hooping.
Oh, yeah.
You understand? Like there's just so many things that involve that. And these are more ancestral, you know, style of movements. Once again, you know, being organic with the pelvis also, not being stiff, not just about working out, you understand? Not about doing the exercises in alignment. You can liberate emotionally, physically, and also through dance and expressive movements like that.
Yes, that second chakra is all about flow.
Yeah.
So that water moving, so if you have sexual energy that needs to move or tension, working the hips like you said, and dancing or some kind of flow, that movement is so good, especially for that second chakra.
Yeah. And then, yeah, I think that is pretty good, you know? That should get you moving and grooving, I think, you know? Right? Anything else?
Mid-center line, breathing, core 4.
Wrapping it up.
Yes,
a message. Your pelvic floor doesn't exist in isolation, and neither should your training or your approach, your idea, your philosophy on it. It's a whole body, mind, awareness, breath. So important.
I think it was really interesting in one of the research papers that I was reading about. They mentioned chronic stress and perceived tension can perpetuate and worsen pelvic floor pain and hypertonicity, that tightening and contraction. And also men. Also, so this isn't just for women, because hello men, you have a pelvic floor as well.
And more men suffer from back pain and hip dysfunction than women, by the way. We just make noise about it. you guys don't as much.
Yes, one of the research studies noted that 78% of men reported depression and higher levels of catastrophizing than the individual women who had that same experience. So that tension will amplify pelvic floor issues.
Yeah, and then, I mean, I don't know, if this episode gave you a new way to think about pelvic floor and your pelvic floor health and your approach to it, hit the like, subscribe, share, drop a comment, give us your feedback. Hopefully this helps everyone, from teachers, you know, to those educators, those looking to resolve their discomfort and their pain. And, you know, some students are so curious, you know, if you're here looking for this, you're a curious person already, you're looking for results and for answers. So, and then let us know if you like anything else to be talked about in the podcast.
We'd love to
cover anything too. So.
Yeah, we'll talk about all the things.
Yeah.
But I think that's just really important, that from the more emotional part is your anxiety, depression, chronic stress, is a really big factor into amplifying not only like normal pains, but your pelvic pain. And uncomfortability.
Movement is medicine, breath work is medicine, dance is medicine, everything is medicine. It's like I said, it's work. It's just the awareness, the acknowledging if you are feeling that type of way. I said, a little bit of that discipline.
Stop doing Kegels until you know how to do them.
Don't do Kegels. It's okay. We're better than that. We know better now. We hope you like this, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.
Yes, we'll include some tips, tricks, videos, breathing stuff to check into.
Yeah. Hope you guys enjoy. We'll see you for the next one. Grounded Emotion.
Bye.